that take was wild. Bro, you out of your mind. Guess we're really doing this.
Oh, step in, tune up, let the sparks fly quick. Hot takes tossing like a fast break flick. They break down the chaos, call out the blaze. Every headline flipped in 100 ways. Pushes slants hard when the pressure gets big. Shots get fired, who's right, take a pick. Lamps turn loud, tension gets loud too. Nobody backing down, they're seeing this through. Party the disruption, say what you feel. Party the disruption, sharp to conceal. Party the disruption, always for real. Every week, every day, they spin that wheel.
This is Pardon the Disruption.
Good afternoon, NDL. Welcome to the third episode of NDL's Pardon the Disruption, Season 34. Today we have Swovine, Dcane, and Phreak. This episode we will be covering the top 25 voting in regards to teams with 0 games played or less games than it should be. Updated player ratings. We have another season where a top team has lost its owner with it into the first to second block of the season, as well as what teams have either surprised you or disappointed you so far through block 2. And then we're going to preview games to watch out for block 3. Well,
sounds like a good plan to me.
how you feeling, man?
So yeah, let's dive right in. So in regards to the top 25 voting of the regular season, I feel like navigating teams with no games played is really tricky because sometimes those teams from the past season have shown that they are historically very consistent and may always appear in the top 25. I think part of that is just trying to navigate poll inertia in a way, because if you have them at the very start of the season and you've had them in past seasons where they're comfortably sitting in top 20, top 15, but you're getting weeks in and you still don't have a game from them, I can understand the controversy, my bad, of removing them outright. I think it should be a no-brainer that if you have teams that are playing 3-4 games and you're still waiting for others to even get in one, I think you got to put those teams above our 0 games played teams, no matter how good they are. Yeah, I'd say there's still definitely argument with the whole historical data and poll inertia that it might be difficult to completely remove a team. Usually I try to keep those teams hanging around on those like back 20 through 25 poll votes, but eventually it gets to a point where it's just a little ridiculous. And I think thankfully this isn't going to be too much of an issue this season with the way that we have blocks scheduled, and now that they have kind of those closing deadlines, no one can be 0-0, 1-0, 2-0 by like week 10 of the season. So thankfully we won't really have any issues with that, but you can still have teams where you play maybe 1 game or possibly even 0, and you'll have other teams that are like 4 games ahead or something. I don't know if this is going to necessarily be too much of an issue, like I said, but that's definitely something to navigate, and I'm somebody who tries their best to keep them in the top 25 until it's absolutely impossible to.
Dcane, how about yourself?
For me, this is where it becomes a little bit of a headache because I will go back and I'll look at the scheduling channels. I will go and look at the extended absences, things like that, so that I can see what's going on. Is this coach not playing games because they're just not trying to play their games, or is it just some scheduling conflicts that they've been running into. And if it's just scheduling conflicts, I'm not going to ding you or you and your opponent not being able to get together. If you were just being a lazy effort, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not going to reward you for not um, getting your games in when other people are going out and doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I look at that first, and I do like the new system because for me, not just being a voter, but like when the CFP committee gets together and they have to sit down and they have to look at over these resumes, it's going to be a lot easier for them to be able to factor out certain teams with the new system than it was in previous seasons, because now they don't have to worry about or wait on, well, what if this guy gets these games in and he does this, that, and the third. How will that affect the system that we have or the choices that we've made so far? So I think overall, the first thing that you got to look at is whether or not it's because of the actual coach that those games aren't being played, or whether or not it's just something that's kind of beyond their control, and then kind of go from there. That's how I normally handle it.
Sounds like you're being
What
a
about
nice
you,
guy
Freak?
when it comes to it sounds like you're being a nice guy when it comes to it because you said you actually take a look into it. Um, Personally, I don't like voting on a team that has not played a game. However, I know some teams may schedule their first two buys at the beginning of the season, whether it's block one, having a week one, week two buy, or even block two where you have a week three, week four buy, and then you start getting uneven amounts of games played, which could affect teams and the way you look at the polls. Now, on the other hand, I do love the fact that there are deadlines to get the blocks in. And what I Dcane, what I did want to ask you is you don't like the jump from a 25 team to 8 just because they completed all their games in the last week. You don't like that?
No, I'm gonna have to Scrooge that one right there, buddy.
I thought it was a good thing. I kind of like it. It shows activity, but too late in the season. No, honestly, I love the fact that there's deadlines to get these blocks done now. Um, And these are also reasons why I prefer to do my polls on Friday to make sure that teams do get some games completed because it does mean it could it could either make or break where a team will land in the top 25, or maybe even take them out of it completely. The second topic, with the updated player ratings right at the beginning of the season, 2 blocks into the sorry. The updated player ratings dropped right at the beginning of the season of 34. 2 blocks into the season, are there any specific players that were boosted or a team that significant that a team has improved overall that catches your eye? I'll let Dcane start this one.
Um, I'm not even gonna hold you. I don't pay attention to other people's team improving because that means nothing for my team. Like what does that matter for me? Um, but I do know at where was it I was just looking at? There were recently, yeah, there have been quite a few players that have seen some, very, very good increases. I mean, I don't know if Mike has noticed it, but Mendoza, he's gone up another full point in his overall. I do believe I Simpson has a badge added. I know Diego Pavia, my quarterback, he had the Platinum Field General added. I mean, there's quite a few players that have had some increases go up. But is it going to really impact the team that much? I really don't think so. I really don't. Because I think the team is still going to play however they have been playing. Um, Now, if there are any G5 schools, which I haven't looked into, I should have, so my apologies. If there are any G5 schools that have gotten any rating bumps, then yeah, that's where you'll actually see the difference, I do believe. But as far as like the P4s, you're not really gonna notice it.
Yeah, I kind of agree that it's not too noticeable. It depends on how far back you want to go in terms of rating updates, because I know we haven't had a show in a while, and they always come out with those very micro player ratings updates where people move up maybe one or two. Um, so it's hard for me to assess one individual player, and like Dcane, I'm not always the most focused on other coaches' teams. I know that Texas Tech as a whole has gradually throughout the season just had every player move up at least a few overalls. Um, right now they have two 95 plus players on their defense. I believe they're both edge rushers with multiple platinum badges, so that's terrifying. Uh, David Bailey, the defensive end with pocket disruptor, duress, winning time, and defensive rally. And then Jacob Rodriguez, the outside linebacker with takedown and instinct. So I think if there is any team that would personally scare the hell out of me, it would be a team like that has two absolute demons on defense. Another team that I would give a shout out to that has been going up the ratings recently, and at least with today's player ratings updates, they're now tied for the highest combined offense and defense score in the G5 with Boise State, and that is North Texas. I didn't get a chance to look too closely at who on that team has had the greatest trajectory, but right now an 85 offense and 80 defense, definitely able to rival even some of those Power 4 teams' rosters. So that's something to look out for towards the back half of this NDL season and going into next NDL season. I'm sure that's going to be a team that a lot of people are looking forward to hopefully drafting if they aren't kept into next season at least. Just because you always have people that want to maybe take a step back from the chaos of the Power 4 conferences and how competitive those can get, and maybe snatch up a very strong G5 team. And then a brief shout out to a couple of players on Oklahoma, Taylor Wine and Cortland Guillory, who both recently went up, I think, over 10 overalls each. If I have my notes right, Taylor Wine went from 72 up to 83. Guillory from 76 to 86. That's been a little bit more of a slow crawl. I think that's been over the course of a few updates at least. I was able to take a brief look at the stats. I don't think Wine is starting at this moment for Morton, Oklahoma. Guillory has gotten his name on the stats sheet a couple of times, still buried a little bit in the depth chart. But I'm sure that they'll get a chance to make their names known as the season progresses. So those are my main focal points from the most recent ratings updates. How about you, Phreak?
I'm not going to pass it along to North Texas's own coach here, Drewbacca. Drewbacca, we're talking about the player ratings. What catches your eye, sir?
What's up, boys? I don't know if anybody's seen the standings lately, but you might better look, because this will be the only time you ever see North Texas at the top of the AAC stand. Drew Messmaker, quarterback 1. Caleb Hawkins, RB 1. I don't remember these. They were not good before. Drew Messmaker might have been like a 75, but then he went out and had himself that 600-yard passing game, been putting up ridiculous stats. He's an 87 overall now. I finally have a quarterback that can throw an out route, deep middle ball, so that's a big game change. Caleb Hawkins is currently leading in real life all of Division I in rushing touchdowns. It makes a big difference when you have a dynamic running back where you don't feel like you need to abandon your run game if you get down a score or two, or a turnover or two, you're playing catch up. So to have an effective running back on your roster that you can utilize to help dictate the game, it makes all the difference in the world. So I know people talk about it all the time. This was not the situation for me, but I've been one of those very, very lucky users who had a massive team rating bump come for this season, and predicted 4 wins for myself at the beginning of the season. I'm going to keep predicting 4 wins plus now.
Good. Personally, I have not really taken a look at all the player changes and boosts that have occurred. Fortunately, I barely have time to log on to the game. So I only log on when I have a game scheduled and try my best to reorder that depth chart and put it into place. We're going to move on to the third topic. We now have another season where a top 5 team in the game is suddenly without a coach. One block into the season, the University of Georgia this year and Ohio State in season 32. How do you feel about these in-season coaching vacancies and how a school like Georgia remains open as newcomers choose lesser teams to try and achieve a decent draft position over the almost guaranteed day 2 University of Georgia pick presents itself? Swovine, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know the full situation as to what transpired with Jose's leaving of Georgia, but I feel like you need to finish out a season you started, barring significant emergencies. But what I like about the NDL is if you need an extended amount of time off, just communicate that to Nidler and your fellow opponents for the season. It should mostly work out. Worst case, maybe you do need to step back and take a leave of absence, but that still leaves the door open to coming back the following seasons and picking up where you left off. And then obviously the best case is the league has the flexibility to accommodate your needs and schedule, and you can just keep coasting and still finish out your season as normal. In terms of how I feel about schools like Georgia being wide open during the season, obviously it sucks because I'm sure that there are quite a handful of coaches that would love to play with such a dominant team such as Georgia and maybe give themselves a little mid-season reset. Maybe their season isn't going as smoothly as they hoped, and just taking a gamble on a very high risk, high reward team like Georgia and all of the challenges that their projected wins and conference and the competition that they face kind of presents. But it's definitely a thought that I've had where it kind of feels a little awkward that you have such an elite team being vacant for an undetermined amount of time when there are probably plenty of guys mid-season that would love to pick them up. Obviously, that's kind of weird to navigate, especially with the whole figuring out coach score and coach contract stuff. It'd be very difficult to just drag one individual coach to a new team, especially if you have to go down a pecking order of trying to evaluate who deserves to make that switch mid-season, who deserves that spot the most as a coach. But then on the flip side, if you're giving it to a brand new, unproven coach who it's their first time in the NDL, that can also be a rocky first season experience for them. And it may not be as competitive as you might hope with a more seasoned veteran that might be more experienced with rostering a P4 team, or having that level of experience playing really talented users like those guys in the SEC. But yeah, I think it's just a little bit tricky to navigate figuring out who you can even put into a team like Georgia right in the middle of the season.
I'll take Georgia. I'd be happy.
Phreak, that was Drewbacca's question. Can I chime in?
Yes, you can.
Appreciate you. Yeah, so I brought that one up specifically. So first off, I brought that question up not to like get on Jose, you know what I mean? Coaches leaving, I'll leave that part separate because people got things going on. I'll never question that. You know, that's their business. I only look at it from a league as a whole, right? and what it does to the league. And the hardest part about it, I think, is I'll use the Ohio State as an example. I was on season 32 playoff committee. Shell didn't get punished in the end, but there was a massive issue with Shell's schedule being so weak, and that Ohio State game was going to be the one regular season game for him to hang his hat on. And though it didn't, it ultimately could have impacted him in the season 32 playoff negatively, entirely outside of his control. Same thing with coaches matchups. Georgia's not going to be ranked, right? I don't know how it works. I think if you beat a team at the time they were ranked, that counts as a ranked win for bonus points, right? Don't quote me, but it's so. Jumper got a bonus point for beating a ranked win team. Nobody else on that schedule now is going to have that opportunity. That's not a Jumper thing to anybody. It just goes to show how, on top of making the playoff harder for the committee, for everybody involved that needs to try to play their games and can't, it just does a disservice to the league as a whole. And then especially when you talk about owners and their season success and their ability to potentially draft higher for next season. So we're going to have to live with it, right? We can't change what happens in people's lives. But when you just, if a Sunbelt team disappeared, probably we don't talk about this, right? But it's really these high-profile teams that would have a say in how the season shapes and potentially the playoff plays out. It's unfortunate. That's all there is to it. Just unfortunate. I thought it'd be a good thing to talk about. Hope everything is good in Jose's life. Unfortunately, no Georgia right now. Guess we didn't have to see. That's all.
Hey, you want to follow up?
So that is probably one of the hardest situations to deal with in a league when you have a coach leave any team. It's not even just the teams like Georgia, just any team. It's just that teams like Georgia, like Drew said, they're more impactful because that team is on a certain standard, not just because of the quality of the team, but it's typically a ranked team and it's typically in a harder conference. Now, a team that should have given some other teams a run for their money on their schedule is no longer there and available. Now that's an easy win that other people don't get the benefit of taking. I mean, granted, Georgia probably wouldn't have been ranked as high after the next poll came out, if at all, to be honest. But it doesn't change the fact that that opportunity is still no longer there. So let's say if they were ranked and then the next game they go into for the next block, that opponent gets the opportunity to earn those points, but now it's not there. And yeah, it's a little unfair. But that's one of those situations where there's not much you can really do. I mean, because um, I, I mean, a new coach coming in, I don't see why they wouldn't take Georgia because regardless of what team you take, you're going to be a day two team. Like that's a given. You are a new coach coming into midseason or coming into the season when it just started. You might you're pretty much going to fall off to day two anyways. Um, because most of the teams that are going to be available at that low end are not going to be teams that's going to really, yeah, it's not going to happen. So, I mean, taking a chance of taking a Georgia and at least getting on the higher end of day two I don't really see a problem with that. But it's also whether or not you want to deal with the headache of, learning the team, getting the team, and then having to deal with all the harder, difficult coaches in the SEC that are a little bit more accustomed and have their system down by the time you come in. Um, I don't know if there's ever going to be something to fix something like that. I don't know. One thing that we could do, or one idea, is instead of throwing a new coach into that, I mean, either we can just go ahead and do the full sim like we did with Ohio State, or we can just do a ghost coach. We don't say who the coach is. It's not about the only person that would probably know would be their opponents, but That coach just goes in, plays those games, and just records the outcome. That's another opportunity or another possibility of what we could do in situations like that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. But I'm pretty sure the league and the powers that be, we're gonna make the best decision that we possibly can for the overall um, benefit for the league. Freak.
Well said, guys. I do want to say that we do have currently have two openings when taking a look at it, and I've been seeing the introductions chat flooded with a lot more people coming in. So I can see that UGA should probably be filled maybe within a week or two. Now, the good aspect of the the team being open and now these deadlines is the fact that we still have actually 1 or 2 more weeks of this block being open. No, 1 more week of this block being open because it will close when block 4 begins. So if, for example, we do get an owner for UGA, they can at least play Vegas, probably get tuned up a little bit, or maybe they're legit with UGA and they tune Vegas up. Um, and then they could still finish out the rest of their season because looking at UGA's schedule, they really only missed one game. And when that new coach does come in, they will have the opportunity to play a lot more ranked opponents, get a lot of season success, and boost the aspect of potentially maybe keeping the team. I know it will be 3 missed polls and potentially 2 missed stats or 1 missed stat. Who knows? I don't know if Jose happened to put his stats in there. Um, However, in regards to the back to the topic, life happens. Unfortunately, people have to drop out for one reason or another. Unfortunately, I pray that there's no complications with whatever Jose's with whatever's going on with Jose. And I'm just hoping that the league is able to get the admin is able to get this team filled, and let's see UGA balling again. I mean, I don't think the league is going to allow UGA to just remain open and allow all those teams to get sim wins when it's all said and done. Um, Dcane with what you said about the ghost coach, yeah, that would be pretty cool. But I mean, this league was always based on 100 plus owners. We continue to have more people playing games coming in, and who knows which new owner is going to take UGA and see what they happen to do with them. Let's head on to topic number 4. About 4 games into the NDL season, um, are there any teams you've been pleasantly surprised by or disappointed by so far? Were there any Block 2 results that caught your eye? Um, I'm I'm just gonna start this off and say, what the hell is going on at Auburn? Weasel is a legend. He is very good at the game. He definitely loves trash talking the chat. But what is up with the record? What's going on here? Dcane, you want to follow?
Um, this game is it's a different beast, okay? And it's not about the coaches per se. The game itself doesn't make sense. First of all, Auburn, they look okay on paper. Okay, like I had the choice between Auburn and Vandy, and I just couldn't justify going Auburn. I couldn't. Um, don't really put the blame completely on Weasel because I mean, it, you have to get the game, but then there you can call the right play, have a make the right read and deliver the ball right on time, and then some EA stuff just happens. Like, or you can call the right defense, and your guys could be in the backfield ready to stuff the run, and EA stuff just happens. So I mean, you really can't say, oh well, look at your record, you're really not doing that well. It's like I'd have to really go back and look at your games to see what's going on in those games and whether or not it's you and your play calling or your skills, or if it's just you've been running into those games. Because I'm sorry, I've seen a lot of them. I've been I've been dealt with a lot of them. Like it is happening at a very high frustrating rate. So I can't really put all the I don't really want to say blame, but yeah, I guess blame is the word. I can't really put all the blame on the lack of success at Auburn on Weasel. There has to be some other factors. I just haven't really looked into them to see if there are. But I'm trying to give my man the benefit of the doubt and say that it's not all on him.
Okay, fair enough.
Well,
Yeah. So I have maybe a couple of teams that surprised me, and then a couple of not as much disappointments because I think that they absolutely have what it takes to turn things around. But a little bit of a shakier start than I anticipated. So starting off with the surprise, from a coaching perspective, it's probably not a surprise to anybody that Roke is doing quite well for himself over at Mississippi State, despite the team overall deficit he might be facing in the SEC. But he started off 4-0. He's shown so far that his dominance in ACC conference play with a weaker team like Boston College in the past is no fluke. I know he did have a close call on the road against Jokers in Memphis, but traveling there is no cakewalk, and you got to give credit where credit's due, even if it's by slim margins. I know Roke typically in the past has scheduled notoriously difficult out of conference matchups, and it's kind of come back to bite him at times with his record by the end of the season being maybe like 7-5 or 8-4, something that doesn't really speak to how good of a coach he actually is. But it seems like he's taking a much more measured approach this time around. I think his most difficult games this time around are that Memphis game that he snuck a win out of, and then Antelopes and Iowa State. So we'll have to wait and see how he fares against some heavyweight teams like Tennessee and Texas A&M, which are both up this block. But the games might be closer than what you'd expect on paper, and I've been pretty pleasantly surprised by that team's output so far. In terms of maybe a couple of quick G5 shoutouts, over in the American Conference, the American's doing good stuff. Obviously, you always have Memphis and Jokers being a real threat. I want to give a shout out to Pirate Flag, who I'm sure has been on some people's radar since the week 1 win against NC State. He's still going strong at 4-0. And then a brand new coach that I've had a conversation or two just talking to and getting to know. Hughes over at Temple is currently 3-0. I think he's had some pretty great results. Had a nice win recently in week 4 against Massachusetts with Ant Rains. I know that Ant Rains was receiving a little bit of preseason buzz. So it's nice to see that you just have a lot of solid competition over in the American Conference. Some disappointments. I'd probably have to start off with Air Force, and it's not as much a disappointment and more so just I had my eye on Dub and Air Force as a potential Mountain West favorite to start this season, and while his schedule hasn't been the easiest with a Washington road game, I did have some high expectations just because he's a fellow former Sunbelt Conference player. I got a chance to play him last season in a BBB game that, gosh, I think it was 60 piece for each of us, some crazy offensive performance, but I know he can light it up on any given night. But Air Force is a tricky team to figure out given its roster makeup and how you typically tend to scheme with them. I feel like the 1-3 start simply just a reflection of Dub learning the ropes with a new team. He showed some signs of life in a nail-biter road game against Boise State recently. Eventually came up short. I think it was a 3-point game only. So I'm still holding out hope that he finds a way to get comfortable with that team. And I don't think he has too difficult of a schedule moving forward. So the two teams that I'm kind of looking at on his schedule that might give him some trouble are Wyoming and the season 33 runners-up, UNLV. But I think it'll be an interesting path to turning things around for him. In terms of Power 4 teams, going back to the game between East Carolina and NC State, I think that week 1 scare for Holmey with the road loss against East Carolina probably can be seen as a disappointment, and then he had a close nail biter against Wake Forest. It was a 1-score game that took the grace of God pretty much to make them come back, if I'm remembering. I want to say it was that game where it went to overtime. Hopefully I'm not mistaking this for a different Wake Forest game, but it was down to like the last minute or two of possession, and it ended up flipping the right way for NC State, and they narrowly escaped with a victory. But other than that, I think they had a loss to Duke as well, so they are a very, very slim margin from starting off a season 0-3 after just reaching the CFP. And no matter how you cut that, I think that's got to be a little bit of a sting for Homie. And with the ACC, I feel like there's a lot of teams that are trying to vie, if not for first place, because I know that Hefe and Clemson are always a formidable opponent. At the bare minimum, second place and at least a shot at that title game. And NC State's going to have to claw their way back from the back of the pack this time around to see if they can make it there again.
Drew?
Yeah, so I don't have any disappointments per se. I think the biggest surprise to me is I just went through. There are only 16 out of 64 Power 4 teams left undefeated. 12 out of those 16 are coming from the SEC and Big Ten. Most of your regular players you think of, you will, I should say. But I really just think overall the parity that we're seeing is my biggest surprise. There's some diabolical things going on right now. You got Jaguars 19 at Kansas State, who's always tough out, and he's already picked up a nice win against Tennessee and beat Iowa State. But then he went and lost to Rutgers, which is on an absolute gear right now. And then obviously a loss to LSU is never a bad thing. Duke and Jumper have already taken a loss. They lost to Indiana and Big Mike, who himself I had as a playoff competitor, or in the playoff in my prediction. He's already off to a 2-2 start with a loss to LSU and a loss to Illinois and NADOG. So again, these guys, credit to them, they scheduled some big out-of-conference games. You love to see that. I hope that in the NDL, whether or not we're like real life and sim, we don't overly punish these guys for scheduling these games. And, maybe split it. Obviously, Big Mike, he goes and beats Jumper. That's highly respectable. I don't think that anybody's going to say losing to LSU by 7 or Illinois by 3 makes you bad, right? So there's quite a number of 1-loss and even 2-loss teams out there already that you still expect to see around at the end. Vegas, sorry, but here we are early on in the season, 1 ranked game in, another loss. I love Vegas, but I just don't know if he's ever going to overcome beating the ranked team he needs to beat to get. It's hard to say. Even El Jefe Clemson, he's there at 1-1. We're early, right? We haven't played a ton of games, but he's another guy that historically has performed very well in the ACC. But when it comes time for those big out of conference ones, especially the playoffs, he's struggling. So he's already taken an early season loss to A&M. Not a problem, but just think about it. I guess one surprise for some people, I heard somebody say only NC State 1-2 lost to East Carolina. I had actually spoke about that on one of our first episodes where I willfully said I had ranked, NC State much lower than many others. I had still had it in my top 25, but I had just been one that looked back and felt like the defensive success that had carried into a couple of wins last year would be very hard to replicate. And I think that seems to probably be playing out. Yeah, so I guess my biggest, I don't know, I want to call it surprise. Anytime he's been here, he's been good. I think that I would just say right off the rip here, MJ Kemp at Rutgers, he's got a 59-56 win over Devin Higgins with Arkansas. And we know Devin's a tough out, and that Arkansas offense put up points. He went out and beat Jaguars in Kansas State 49-32, and took down Iowa 44-14. So, that's a pretty mid-pack Big Ten lower tier Big Ten today, and he's off to a pretty hot start. So good for him. There's plenty of other guys that probably deserve one for a good start. It's East Carolina, 4-0. I am one of those guys that is pro ranked G5s early and maybe not rank them later, but I'm a merit guy only. So if you're 4-0 with a Power 5 win, you ought to be in the top 25 regardless. Shout out to Irish guys. I guess that's it. I just think that the parity is pretty cool. Very few undefeated teams. At the end of the day, all that can help us do is probably have even more banter about college playoff when it comes time for that, and that's good for us. That's all.
Hey guys, I got to drop.
All good, no worries. The show will carry on without you. But I appreciate you stopping by, and I appreciate you facilitating so far. And as always, your commentary is incredibly appreciated. So we'll see you next show. All right.
Gracias, señor.
All right. Take care. So moving into our last topic, then, as we wind down. Games to watch out for in Block 3, and kind of taking a sneak peek at some of the matchups that we think will carry some heavy implications or just in general be really fun to watch. Dcane, do you want to start us off?
All right. So, first game was Michigan State and Tennessee. Honestly, I don't know if Vegas has the oomph in him that he's had in previous seasons. Don't really hear him that active on the boards. You don't really, see him as much as you did before. So I don't really know if he's really playing the game as much as he did in the past. So that is, this is Brooks' chance to go ahead and continue on and roll over on that. Um, USF, I actually had an opportunity of playing in the little tourney that we have going on. And he's actually pretty good. Like I know USF, so I knew the team. But that was also trying some dumb stuff on defense. But anyways, that was another one of those games where it's like stuff was happening that just really didn't make sense. But oh well, who knows? Penn State and Oregon. That I'm going to make sure I watch that game. I'm definitely going to make sure I watch that game. Because yeah, I really want to see how Shell contains Singleton and the rest of those backs, and I want to see if Smitty is going to be able to play whack-a-mole with whatever receiver Shell's going to decide to throw to. Outside of that, I think the next one that I want to see is I want to see the Florida Texas game. That is another one on my radar. I want to see CG, see how him and Jiggy pan out. And I mean, honestly, I give Devin some props, but if Rain makes two adjustments against that Arkansas team, that's not going to be a close game. It's really not. But yeah, those are my takes on the games that I'm watching out for.
Yeah, definitely gotta agree there. Drew, what do you think?
I'm going through it right now. I hadn't gotten my full homework done on this question. Um, there are some notes. So obviously, we go back. I just real quick go back to the Georgia one. There was a tight matchup, Alabama Georgia this week in this one. That's not going to happen. That's an unfortunate one to miss. A week 5 game that maybe I would look at, just interestingly, is Oklahoma versus Boise State. Just thinking long term, season long. Boise State's a pretty consistent top 25 team in this league. I can't remember. I think they've been in the playoff at least once since we came back to 29. But 3-1, probably another loss would take him out of the playoff conversation. But more 4-0, putting up a lot of points so far this season. Just be curious to see if he continues the strong run that he's on to start, or if Boise State can prove their mettle and show that they're still a team to be one that I'm looking at. Surprise to some people probably, but I still got my eye on Block M on Drunk on Downs. I made a bold prediction that he would make the playoffs this season. So far, he's 3-0. He looks pretty good. Not a crazy matchup in week 5. Camaro will probably take care of business. Outside of that, a game in week 6 that's just kind of interesting. I noticed the Missouri versus USC game. Big Brian, he was there last year. He's off to a 3-1 start. He's got some nice wins. USC already took an early season loss. I thought maybe cruising, not that he won't, obviously it's early, but he's already got a loss too. Another one probably, well, that's pretty much been his. So there's already, again, back to the whole, there's very few undefeated records. Last one that I picked, again, Rutgers going to go play Old Miss in week 6. Just want to see if Rutgers continues the top start that they're on. Overall, I'm looking parity that we have so far, and I'm enjoying the fact that it seems like on any given day, anybody can go out and win. So just look to continue to see some close scores and fun games here in Block 3.
Yeah, no doubt. And then, yeah, going back to what you mentioned about the parity in the league right now, I think the Big Ten takes up a bulk of the teams that you see right now that are undefeated. I'm sure a lot of them are either Big Ten or SEC. Go figure. But yeah, with this block, honestly, take your pick with Big Ten teams to watch, because you have, I think, 6 right now that are on the top 25. And then you have 2 more on the wings with Michigan State and Metro D, and I believe Rutgers and MJ Kemp were mentioned earlier in the show. So you got 8 viable teams that are all trying to make a name for themselves and stake their claim in the Big Ten. But without a doubt, the most influential game, and I think the most entertaining one for this block, has got to be Penn State at Oregon. It kind of goes without saying that a top 5 battle between 2 CFP juggernauts is going to have major implications about how the field may look down the line during bowl season. This game is certainly one of the earlier sneak peeks we get at a potential CFP matchup. It'll be interesting to see how Shell and Oregon take on a new coaching foe in the Big Ten with Smitty in this matchup. I know Smitty at the beginning of the season, admittedly, he did say he had some struggles here and there with setting up his offense in the new environment. But after 3 games, it looks pretty clear to me that any kinks have been worked out, and he's kind of got his squad working like a well-oiled machine, I believe averaging just over 34 points a game, if I'm not mistaken. I know he did have a pretty competitive game against Brady over at Appalachian State, which may take some people by surprise, and I'm sure, judging by the scoreboard, it took Smitty a little bit by surprise. But he's been very strong and as a coach at Penn State. No surprises there. The spread on the game, I think, is a narrow 1.5 points in favor of Oregon. The over-under just about 53, but honestly, I would not be surprised at all if that number got crushed. I think that's a little conservative a number, to say the least. And then one other game I want to give a quick dive into is an ACC matchup between Cal visiting Duke. Cal's been quietly putting together a nice season with a new coach at the wheel. I think they are 3-1 if I'm not mistaken. I know last season they definitely went through some turmoil. They were tested hard in their season opener against USC in cruising, and I think they surprised a few people with their narrow loss and a close comeback almost, 31-35. But this will be their first in-conference test, and it comes against a proven formidable opponent in Tex Nolan, the Duke Blue Devils. I'm sure that'll be a fun one to watch. All right. Yeah, if there are no other comments, questions, concerns, I think that wraps up this episode of Pardon the Disruption. To anyone tuning in live, I appreciate you taking the time of your day to listen to us talk about the league. And if you're listening on podcast at a later date, glad to have you listening along to us, and I hope to see you guys coming back here every week. And obviously, as always, thank you to Dcane, Drew, and everybody else on the team that loves to come in here every week and provide their input.
Appreciate you, Swovine.
All right.
Nice to be here,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Good show.
Yeah, good show indeed. All right. Take care, everybody.